Why are we in Psalm 19?
I think each sends us to a psalm. The Psalms have this beautiful way of distilling down principles or ideas that are throughout Torah, throughout the Tanakh, and throughout all of Scripture, and helps you focus on a heart issue. And then also, the other thing is his character, the Lord's his greatest desires, his hopes for you, and his heartfelt love in a fatherly way. Sometimes the heart of a monarch, a king over his kingdom. So you draw near to him through the Psalms in a unique way that you can't through any other way, because it's the same reason everyone says the same about things like listening to the radio. Music and songs have a way of bypassing the barriers in somebody's heart. You know, there's so many people who give testimonies of hearing a worship song for the first time. You know, maybe somebody who's never been inside of a church with the more modern worship songs, and some of them are so beautiful because they take their words from the Psalms and maybe add a verse or a testimony, and then go back to the words of the psalm. And so many people have had that ice around their heart, or that brick wall that they put up, and maybe believers around them have been trying to reach them for years, you know, praying for them and witnessing to them, desperately hoping for them to see the light through that shell. And then, you know, they go to a worship service and somehow the Lord softens their heart, and the friends ask them to go, and then they hear this song and it just wrecks them. It gets past all their defenses, and it surprises them. And I know we have to be careful, right? Because the frequencies of music and the lyrics, the words, when they come together, they impact spiritually, you know, very powerfully. And as I've shared before many times, you know, before I was saved, there were songs that had low frequency, dark lyrics with anger, bitterness. And before I was saved, I loved those songs. And this is just a true testimony. I loved those songs. And the Lord opened my eyes after that. You know, I've given testimony about how the Lord broke through. But the Lord opened my eyes. I got panicked one day because I was listening to the lyrics of the song Ironic and how angry and bitter it was. And I was loving it. And I stopped and I just broke down and cried in the car. I'm like, why do I love this song so much? It's not good. It's not happy. It's not, you know, but I just love it. And it got me very alarmed. Like, what's happening to me? And so I asked that question out loud in the car. I was stuck in traffic. I was going to be late for work again. I was feeling very bitter and frustrated. I didn't know that I could pray to the Lord and ask him to calm me down, or I didn't know anything. And
So this was before you were saved.
That's what I said. Yeah. Before I was, and very soon after that, the other testimonies that I've given about being in the church and hearing scripture for the first time. But I will also say, the first time that you and I went to a service because the Lord was calling you at the same time, and I have to say, the minute the worship music started, and I could hear and I could receive the words, and the frequencies of the music were so different. I was wrecked. I was just wrecked because it got past all of the mess. The music was so powerful. So it's also a word of warning about being careful what you listen to, being aware that Satan knows how to manipulate the frequencies to disturb and disrupt you and to interrupt your communication with the Lord. And when you're surrounded by those words and those frequencies, it's not healthy for your spirit. Your nefesh is it gets harmed by it, and you physically look like you're fine, but inside you're being damaged. So that being said, I think that's part of the reason why the Psalms, the Lord uses the Psalms for everybody. But for me, every time I read them, there's questions that I have, or enlightenment, where he shows me things, where this truth coming from this psalm is displayed in the other scriptures, in the Torah, in the historical books, Chronicles and Kings, or, immediately after reading this, you start thinking about the psalm, focusing on something that needs attention, and the answer to all your questions comes from, the Torah. So the Lord uses the Psalms also in a way like the songs. Maybe if you read a whole chapter or a whole book, you wouldn't have the same result as the psalm, which would just get right in. It gets absorbed right in directly,
Well, I think we need to let the people know, how important music is to you. Why don't you give them a little background on that? How important music was to you and me. And
well, for me, my whole life was. It's kind of an interesting thing because I always loved music, and as a child growing up, it didn't matter what it was. I liked all kinds of music. And then later I got to things that were my favorite, but I just remember spending hours in my parents' house, and they had a collection of vinyl albums, and I would just play them all and memorize the words and listen to them, and then it was just an interesting thing. So I had this amazing mixture of, my father's albums were mostly sort of modern Irish trios, and tenors, and all these different Irish flavored music, but the modern stuff that you would hear on the radio, but at that time. And my mom had crooners and solo artists, and she loved Johnny Mathis, and she loved Barbra Streisand, and she loved, so I had this crazy mixture of music between the two of them. So they loved show tunes, Broadway musicals. And so, and then I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name. I think he played the trumpet, but instrumental music was very big, jazz and things like that in the 60s.
Dizzy Gillespie?
No, no, no. What I'm saying is, so they picked up on the stuff that came right after the big band era. So, like Marv Halpert and, I'm trying to think of the names of the old artists. And so they were, there was a lot of musical interpretations that I was exposed to. So I loved it. And my grandmother bought me a piano, and my mother paid for piano lessons. And I have to say, I I was not gifted. I wasn't gifted, but I was determined to learn how to play. And on top of that, I had really, really tiny, short little fingers, and trying to reach the chords that my teacher wanted me to play, and all of that. And she just kept saying, "Oh, you have to stretch your hands and exercise," and so it made it very challenging to play. So I learned to play, but I wasn't gifted. I could play the piano mechanically. I could memorize things. I had a lot of fun, but I was surrounded by students in the school who were socially friendly with me, who were very gifted musicians, extremely. And what I found is I gravitated towards them. I hung around with them. These young girls who were gorgeous, could play the piano beautifully, and they loved it. And some of them were competitive. They played in recitals and also competitions. Now these girls practiced, they told me, 6 hours a day, and even though it was easy for them, they still practiced 6 hours a day. And I wasn't one of those people. I loved the sound of the piano. I loved playing it. I also played violin in the school orchestra, which I enjoyed, but the violin was something, again, I never got it to play that sweet sound that you're supposed to hear. I tried really hard. So I wasn't a gifted musician, but I was a hack. And then finally, from my earliest, our grammar school actually had a girls' ensemble group. We had a brilliant woman who, at that time, they had it in the school budget. And she was able to carve out some time to make a small girls' ensemble group. And I was just thrilled. So that was where I stayed. The rest of my school days, I was in every choir, every singing group you could come up with, And so my life was filled with music. And then when I met you, and you were a music, really a music fan, a music lover, and you had, this massive record collection, and you enjoyed a lot of it, really the same, not all, we had differences, but there were a lot of vinyl albums that we both had in our collection. So it was really easy for us in the beginning because, we both loved singing. And so music was just a huge, huge part of my life. I, I had the radio on from the time I got up until the time I went to bed, just listening. And when the radio wasn't on, I was listening to my vinyl albums. And then, there was the cassette thing where I could make a mixture of songs. And I spent hours and hours putting together collections of songs on a cassette and listening in the car. So that was me, So I guess the Lord knew, Jehovah knew, as soon as I set foot in that first service, that as soon as the worship music started, it was going to speak to my heart and my spirit, in much more than just a small way. Some people, I like music or whatever. With me, that was the door into my heart, and so that day, the first service, I got saved, So I think that's the power of the Psalms. They're supposed to be sung. They're supposed to be read like they're the lyrics to the song, because they are. It was a song. Every one of them is labeled as a song, So I receive it that way. I understand it that way. As sometimes I try, when I'm reading the Psalms, I try to imagine a melody. Like, I wonder what it sounded like. What was the melody like when David would sing it? For me, it's an exercise in making sure I stay connected to this. Really was a song. It was sung in the temple. It was sung by David. And we know he was a musician his whole life. And he played instruments and sang and wrote songs. And he was known even among his family, his friends, the people around him, as a gifted musician. And of course, we know he created new instruments just for the temple worship. So he was a very creative person. And how many of us would try to invent our own instruments, right? And he spent years developing instruments for a temple that was in the future. It wasn't even there yet, but he had it all prepared, ready for worship as soon as the temple opened up.
So what we're saying to everybody that's listening to Ramblings Around the Kitchen Table is music was it's a very big part of our lives, representing Kelly and myself. It's even how the Lord brought us together, and the way Beth Gleam was actually formed was through a worship team. So
yeah, ultimately we had a worship team, and there were 4 of us, and we did cover songs that were already written, but we also had a woman who wrote songs. And so that was before it was the anchor and built the framework of what later became Beth Goyim Messianic Congregation. But we didn't know it at the time. We used the music as an outreach. We used the music as a way of reaching the unsaved, because people are willing to listen to music. So we knew how powerful it was. There were a lot of people that responded immediately, because we would go somewhere and we would worship and sing these songs. And we even for a little while had worship dance as part of our team going out. And so we understand the power of the music to get past barriers and things, to open up their heart to receive the love of the Lord. And I know it does for me.
Yeah, and it was very special for us to go out and worship. And we were invited to many places to worship, and we worshiped at a.
Oh yeah, we started out of a heart of worship, pure. Yeah, we got invited places, and they were divine appointments, though. It wasn't like we were out advertising our services or anything. We didn't go. It was strictly, we would get an invitation and go, and then somebody from that session would then link us to a friend or a family member, and then so it was word of mouth that connected us. So we had this steady stream of appearances.
That became a great blessing, because we were singing at a Catholic funeral, and this nun.
Oh yeah. I mean, we and the Lord made divine appointments, but they were all incredible. We're at a Catholic funeral. We were at the Seventh-day Adventist. They just invited us in, which who does that, right? It's only the Lord that could open that door, because, you know, Jehovah Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, Catholics, you know, we just were sent in, kind of knocking down barriers and letting light into places where people thought they knew the truth. And, you know, there were always people in the group. No, we did not. Everyone got saved, but there was always 2-3 people who would come up to us and want to talk more, and would follow us out to the parking lot, or follow us as we're loading up the car with our equipment, you know, wanting desperately to talk more. And so we were sent in there because somebody had questions or doubts about what they were being taught, and they wanted to know the truth. So the Lord used the music to ease the way and make a way for those people to connect, you know.
Yeah, so a Catholic nun came to really accept Messiah, and Seventh-day Adventist leadership, you know, they came to really accept, you know, Messiah, Yeshua, and you know, so we went from place to place, you know, just worshiping the Lord, and you know, the Lord just used it to bless His kingdom. So, and then Beth Glenn was born, and you know, when Beth Glenn was born, it was born of a worship team, you know, and we'd sing in Hebrew, Spanish, and English, and that would be a real great blessing, you know. So the Psalms. So why are we in Psalm 19 today?
So in Psalm 19, the opening 4 verses, it's a lot to take in. There's a lot going on here that I don't think is specifically discussed very often at all, but it's a powerful instruction about creation, the purpose of creation. You know, the Lord existed before creation. He didn't personally need creation, but out of His heart of love, He created all things. And there's a lot we don't understand about creation that we're just now starting to have some idea. And we've gone over things like the study of frequencies, and, you know, even the definition of light and what it is, matter, what's solid, and you know, what things we can touch and see and feel. But then there's another frequency level of existence. We're just now, as humans, starting to even understand a little of this. But then you go back to something like a psalm like this, telling you what's real and what isn't. So the heavens declare the glory of God. The dome of the sky speaks the work of His hands. Every day it utters speech. Every night it reveals knowledge. Without speech, without a word, without their voices being heard, their line goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. There's a lot going on there. And I've always been fascinated with science, by the way, not just music, but anytime there was a new study and they discovered something new about the earth, about geology, or about the planets, or medical science about the body, about the brain, you know, all of this research leads us closer to the Lord. If you're really looking for truth and you don't have an agenda, you're just looking for truth, the Lord will open up gateways for these researchers who are hungry for truth. And He allows them to see, you know, how He put this together, how this system on the earth operates, how this body system is connected. It just brings you closer to Him. And so the heavens declare the glory of God. So there's this purpose. The heavens were created by the Lord to show himself, to present himself as a representation of his glory, kavod. And then the dome of the sky speaks the work of his hands.
And so you're reading on the CJB.
I am reading the CJB.
Yeah, let me read the NASB out of it here. For the choir director, Sama David, the heavens are telling of the glory of Elohim, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. It doesn't have the dome there, it has the expanse.
So is the dome just whole cloth made up with an agenda?
Well,
What's the Hebrew word there?
yeah, let's go here. The sound, the glory, Elohim, work of his hand. Declaring their expanse. He has it. Declaring their expanse, okay? Expanse is right here.
Strong's H 7549. Rakia.
Rakia means extended surface, expanse, firmament, expanse, flat as base, support, firmament, a vault of heaven, supporting waters above. By the Hebrews, a solid and supporting waters above.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
The last part, considering the firmament, a vault of heaven, supporting waters above, considered by Hebrews a solid and supporting waters above.
Okay. So that gives a deeper meaning. So here in this particular psalm, there's this idea of speaking and words. And we know that the Lord's voice is powerful for creation. He spoke and it was there. And his voice manipulated matter to create things. And we also know from other studies in scriptures and things that we've gone over recently is that's why there's so much instruction in the Torah and in the Psalms, in Proverbs, about being careful and understanding the power of your speech, because the frequencies do affect matter. And we know that from science now. Just speaking, you can affect matter.
What we're talking about, everybody, is the frequencies. Like when a person hits a note and they can shatter a glass or something like that.
So being careful with the words you choose, being careful what you say, and one of the scriptures that has always deeply affected me and put trembling in my heart is we're told that every careless word that you utter will be judged. And at the judgment, every careless word that you have uttered, which for me is a terrifying thought because I never shut up. And I don't know how many careless words. I'm always repenting and asking the Lord to, by the blood of the Lamb, remove those from my record, because I am sorry and I never knew. It's a terrifying idea to me that a careless word, meaning when you're having a severe despair and you are separating yourself away from the Lord because you have no hope, you're in depression and despair, which is not of God. It is not of God, no matter what anyone tells you. The Lord doesn't approve of his children going in despair because you're showing a lack of faith. You're insulting him, like he's not there, like it's offensive to him. Or when you're in a fit of rage, or when you're in a fit of anxiety or panic, fear, and you utter things, those are careless words. And for example,
let's just do the reference. Matthew 12. Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 says, I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it on the day of judgment. Read it louder. Matthew 12, verse 36 said, but I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall be given accounting for it in the day of judgment.
So it's a pretty terrifying thought. Watch your mouth, which is what my mother would say. But it's a good concept because every time you dig yourself a hole and then you fall into it, when you allow emotions that are not necessarily true, you've convinced yourself of a lie. You know, with fear, anger, and despair, none of those are of the Lord, and it's a demonstration of your lack of faith. And some people don't understand that, but it's true, because in those fits of emotion, you know, Psalm 37, if you're having rage and anger, it leads only to sin. And one of the ways that you sin is with your mouth. When you're in a rage and you scream something angry, if you scream something in despair, if you scream something out of fear, those are all, as we pointed out earlier, negative frequencies, very low frequencies. They're not high and elevated on the Lord's level. And even people who say, oh, I love the Lord and I'm always reading the scriptures and I praise him every day. But when your flesh gets sucked into these powerful emotions, right? You're doing damage. You're doing damage by speaking it. And it terrifies me because a lot of people don't understand that. Better to just be quiet because you're thinking things, but then as soon as you speak them, it adds a whole other level. You should be on your face asking the Lord to take the emotion away and not speak it because it does such horrible damage. So getting back to the psalm, we have in these 4 verses, declare, speaks, speech, again, speech, again, voices, words. So we've got like 6 references in 4 verses to the idea of speaking, but then we're not talking about people here. And the other thing that's amazing is what kind of speech, what kind of words, what kind of utterances, what kind of declarations, what's coming out, right, is glory to the Lord, revealing knowledge,
verse 2.
And then there's this line that goes out to all the earth. So it's this glory and knowledge. So those are things that are very super high frequency. When you're praising the Lord and you're glorifying the Lord, when you're speaking truth and knowledge, but these aren't people. This is the Lord's creation. And I go back to, if we don't praise the Lord, the rocks will cry out. Wait, what? Yeah, the rocks will cry out. So we have other places in Scripture which is fascinating to me, that we have these other places in scripture where the creation has this ability to communicate. We were fascinated with this not too long ago, maybe like 5 years ago or whatever, maybe, where we found out trees can communicate, and they actually make a vibration and a frequency, and they communicate to each other. And so if there's some kind of a plague or disease that are killing the trees, the dying tree will emit a frequency and the other trees receive it in order to put up defenses. And one of the things that the trees will do is they will, for example, emit a frequency and a pheromone, a scent that will attract insects or other animals, and the animals actually, because of their normal everyday life, will protect the trees. And this study was just incredibly amazing. So we have this idea of creation, even the rocks, and we know, how many scriptures, how many psalms about the mountains, communicating, the mountains responding to the Lord's voice in ways that we don't understand. Well, it's an inanimate object. No, it's part of creation. And we need to get our mind on it. It's just so incredible. So here we have high level, very uplifting, beneficial, constructive vibrations from the heavens, the expanse of the sky. So these are all where the Lord lives, we're told, his dwelling place, up in the heavens. And then the expanse and the heavens have this line, this verse, this declaration that goes throughout all the earth, and they're words to the end of the world. So all over the place from end to end. So what can we learn from that? Well, this beauty.
Let me just give a reference for rocks crying out.
Okay.
Reference for rocks crying out. Luke 19, verse 40. Yeshua answered, I tell you, if these become silent, the stones will cry out. There's Luke 19, verse 40. Yeshua answered, I tell you, if these become silent, the stones will cry out.
Yeah. So the Lord's going to be glorified and praised, even if none of us do it. We know the trees will clap their hands, the trees are going to sing and worship. The rocks are going to cry out. The mountains will worship. So giving glory to the Lord is part of being, it's a purpose, because we're all part of his creation. And one way or another, he's going to be glorified. It doesn't matter if people have an attitude problem or they reject him or whatever. And it's the ultimate theft that Satan wants to be worshipped. Satan wants all that glory. Satan wants all of that, which it's just an impossible contradiction, because he lives in the lowest frequency there is. And by praising him, which some people do, it's sad, it doesn't remove him from the condition that he's in. He's not eligible. He's not, where he is cannot be reached because he's so low of a frequency. But us, we can be affected by these frequencies. We can be lifted up and built up and yes, healed. We went over that many times. Yeshua spoke, be healed, and the body was instantly healed. and then all of the instructions that were given about how to speak, what to say. It's just incredible. This idea that the heavens and the expanse of the sky. Now, the heavens were there because the Lord created those and he lives there, right?
Correct.
But then the dome of the sky, or the expanse of the sky in the NASB, was part of creation. And immediately they were declaring the glory of the Lord.
The work of his hands, it says here.
I'm sorry?
This is the work of his hands.
And then the other thing that's really amazing, which goes into the rest of the psalm about revealing knowledge. So,
verse number two.
Yeah.
Psalm 19, verse number 2 says, day to day pours forth speech. And right, and night to night reveals knowledge.
Now that's something too about the night, which I just want to draw attention to it briefly, because there are other scriptures about the human experience at night, and that there's meditation that a man is supposed to do at night. There is wisdom that is dispensed at night, on my bed, at night. So the nighttime has this special purpose, and every night it reveals knowledge. Now, I will briefly say also that many studies, and this was years ago, if you're attempting to solve a problem, if you're a musician, like I remember trying to learn to play a song on the piano, and I kept messing up this one line, and my teacher would have me repeat it several times, and I just, for some reason, I couldn't play that one. Sometimes it was just a measure or a whole line of the music. But what you would find is getting frustrated and angry and all of that, because you're trying so hard and you just can't do it, is a waste, because again, you're getting angry and frustrated, and those are not conducive to learning or helping. But what I would find is if I slept and woke up the next day, suddenly I could play it. And I said, why is that? Well, research shows us that your brain continues to work on the problem even while you sleep. The Lord has developed us in such a way that when there's an unresolved problem, that's why, your grandmother might have said, things will look better in the morning. Where did that expression come from, right? Well, maybe grandma didn't have a way to do brain scans, or didn't have a lab, but she knew the principle that your brain would continue to work on the problem even as you slept. And that's the miracle of the design that we have. And
grandma most likely had gray hair. So, it says in Torah that you stand up for a person with gray hair because they're going to have knowledge.
So she knew it'll look better in the morning. It always does, because there's this exchange of knowledge. And at this point, I can't, there's no explanation I have, but every night it reveals knowledge. Well, that's a fact. And it's something that we can enjoy, that part of creation.
Strong's H, 1847. Da'ath.
That's the word for knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, knowledge, it means knowledge, perception, skill.
Yes, that's a big word. Read that again.
Knowledge, perception, skill, discernment, understanding, wisdom.
Yeah. So when you want to skip sleeping because you think you're going to solve this thing and you're going to stay up all night and solve it, very few people ever, that it doesn't get solved, because you're up at night and you're getting anxious and strung out, and then you're drinking coffee at 3 a.m. and you're still trying to solve it, right? But then guess what? You still won't have anything to show for it, except that you're strung out and exhausted and trying to go to work in the next day, it would be better if you would have slept on it.
But there's nothing wrong about drinking coffee at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing at all.
So, staying up all night just doesn't work. Just I want to then reading this whole psalm. It's too deep and it's just wow. But I do want to cover starting with, let's see, where does it start? It's hard for me to read these because my vision is so low. I think, is it the Torah is perfect? Is that 7? I'm trying to read the number there.
Yeah, let's read 7. Read verse number 7.
Yeah. 7, 8, 9, and 10 are just this. You could do a week-long study on this, but I'm going to read it because there's like this building of an idea, and it has to do going back with wisdom and knowledge.
Psalm 19, verse 7 through 10, right?
Yeah. So the Torah of Jehovah is perfect, restoring the inner person. The instruction of Jehovah is sure, making wise the thoughtless. The precepts of Jehovah are right, rejoicing the heart. The mitzvah of Jehovah is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of Jehovah is clean, enduring forever. The rulings of Jehovah are true. They are righteous altogether, more desirable than gold, than much fine gold. One of the most incredible, impactful catalog or list of facts and information and reality and how creation works, that it's so intense to me. There's so much going on there, from healing the mind, healing the body, healing the heart, just from starting with the Torah, and then, well, what's in the Torah? So here we have a catalog. Well, there's instructions in the Torah, right? There's precepts in the Torah. There's mitzvah in the Torah, right? There's rulings in the Torah. So it's like the Torah is a big book, and then there's the table of contents here of what's in there.
Remember Messiah Yeshua said, "Not one jot or tittle be lost from the law, till heaven and earth disappear." Matthew 5:18. So.
Yeah, the creation and all that's in it is directly connected to the Torah. There's actually a connection that when you break it, things start to become destroyed. They start to weaken, crumble. They start to disintegrate, fall apart. And we definitely see that in our world now. We're watching it happen, where just some crazy, crazy stuff is going on. And the fight against Torah to rip it from the believer's hands, from their mind, from their heart, from their soul, all the way to the idea that Yeshua came and canceled the Torah. The most unbelievable but widely accepted lie. It's more than a lie. It's venom. It's an attack. It's terrifying, because without Torah, there is no creation, because the Lord used, again, his words, all that he taught to gave to Moshe to teach to the people. That's what's holding the world together, is right, because Yeshua is the living word. He's the living Torah, and it says he holds the world together. You cannot separate Torah from creation because it's catastrophic on the levels you don't. And it's like a toddler playing with a pretty lighter, I remember back in the day, they used to make lighters, you could get them encrusted with jewels, and smokers would have these high-end, beautiful looking lighters, and, oh, it looks shiny and beautiful. And, the toddler picks it up, and we actually know people that this happened to them. The toddler picked it up and burned the house down. You don't understand what you're doing when you rip Torah out of people's minds, out of their hearts, and dismiss it, throw it away, because you don't understand. You're not qualified. Let me use that word. There's no human that is qualified to make that decision. None. There is no one on this earth that is qualified to decide we can rip Torah from the center of the body of Yeshua and everything will be fine. Well, that's like removing somebody's heart. Oh, let's just remove their heart and they'll be fine. Oh, you're having chest pain. Your heart is hurting. Let's just take it out and we'll see how long you live. It sounds ridiculous, of course, but it is ridiculous to remove Torah from the center of the body of Yeshua. Let's go back to that. Very fundamental. Oh, everybody wants to talk about the body, right? But Torah is the heart of the body. And you want to remove that. Okay, let's see how that goes, crazy scientist. You're on Frankenstein level experimentation here, you can't do it.
Hey, so let's go back to verse number 7. Verse number 7 says, the Torah of the Lord, the Torah of Jehovah is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of Jehovah is sure, making wise the simple. Hey, so you got this beautiful song, and that's what you just spoke about. These are all songs. What kind of music do you think is being played here? What kind of music would you put with this? Is this a heavy metal song? Is this a rap song?
Now this is very high energy music and soaring melody. There's so much power. I'm going to use that word for the first time this morning. There's so much power in these words, because if you reconnect with Torah and think of all the miracles and the people who over centuries put their body in the way, put their safety at risk to preserve the Torah, so we have it. We actually have the Torah. And trying to get your mind around this set of words that are over 4,000 years old, just in a general estimate, and they've survived. And not only survived, but with integrity. They've survived and not been edited or changed or any of it. We have the writings. So why would the Lord do that? Protect this one. Well, there's plenty of, these writings were lost. They were lost to history. We only have fragments of tablets written in stone, written in clay things, writings of, how is it this body of knowledge, which was written on scrolls. Think of how fragile scrolls are. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
I got 5 minutes left.
So
Try to keep these to an hour.
I guess for me, we don't know the melodies. There's some ancient songs that are pretty old that have been preserved and have been passed down. And by the way, I always praise the Lord in my prayers for the musicians because they have a gifting that is so powerful. That's why we need to pray for them, because Satan will steal them and have them using their gifting for evil and all of that. But when the purpose of music is to glorify the Lord and to lift up the congregation in unity to be where he is, we go back to Chronicles, where when all the musicians and the singers and the trumpet players were all echad in unity, the glory of the Lord came down. And I'm always desperate to experience that. I have experienced that throughout my walk. I won't say all the time. I won't say hundreds of times, but I've been in the presence of that kind of unity, and the glory of the Lord came down. And I would just urge anybody to pray for that and hunger for that and seek that out, because it will change. Even if you've been walking with the Lord for 30 years, 40 years, if you've never experienced that, there's more. Just know there is more to experience of the Lord than you'll ever imagine. Just being in that moment when there's actually chad, when everyone is perfectly still, there's no distractions, and actually babies not crying, being totally silent, fidgety toddlers just sitting still, the glory of the Lord coming down. You should seek after that and cry out to the Lord. I want to see that. I want to experience that. There's nothing. There's not enough words to describe it. But anyway, this passage, these 4 verses are just restoring the inner person, making wise the thoughtless, rejoicing the heart, enlightening the eyes, and then of course the fear, and then putting that in context of your life. It just, to me, it's one of the most profound things. Who doesn't want all of those? But you have to want it so you can serve the Lord better. You have to want it to strengthen the body of Yeshua. You have to want these things because you want your mind to have that knowledge and wisdom.
Hey, the last minute here, let me just read the 4 verses one more time. The last minute here is the law, the Torah of the Lord, the Torah of Jehovah is perfect, restoring the soul. Testimony of Jehovah is sure, making wise the simple. Precepts of Jehovah.
Slow down.
Precepts of Jehovah are right, rejoicing in the heart. Commandments of Jehovah are pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of Jehovah is clean, enduring forever. Judgments of Jehovah are true, and righteous altogether, and more desirable than gold. Yes, much fine gold. Sweeter also than the honey and the drippings of honeycomb. One last thing before we close it, when we had Echad, we had a deaf woman playing the piano, and she was able to hear when she was worshiping the Lord.